Hey, welcome back. Right back in the stream. So glad you could return with us. I believe we're up and streaming, and if you would be so kind, somebody somebody just send up a high sign that we're rolling. Be great. I'm gonna assume that we're still streaming. Let me see. If I can just here. Yeah, we're going. Yeah, I'm live. Hi, Matthias. I'm live. Hi, Support Sidecar. We are live, and we just finished a really great session of Imagivate Live with our good friend Sarah Singer-Nourie, and so let's get her back in here. Sarah, how did that feel? Not. It was a little squishy, right? I mean, you and I had a great conversation this morning because um, as much as you and I are wired very similarly, right? We want to get in there. We want to figure out where all of the convention lies, where all of the old stopping points for how people think, and we just want to kind of blast through that. We take different approaches for sure. But when it came down to it this morning, it was like, ooh, we're going to talk about your book and we're going to talk about yourself. And like, all of a sudden you were faced with, I got to be vulnerable. I got to put myself out there, right? What was that like? What was that experience like this morning? Yeah.
Like I need to get over myself. So like I don't know any group of people who can help me do that better than the Imagivate crew. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. I'm sorry, Sarah. I just learned that I still had you kind of muted, but we got you
Oh,
halfway through that last thing.
oh,
I think the question about you know putting yourself out there, it's have you experienced times in the past where you were faced with a moment in time where you were like, this is when I have to walk the talk, right? Like this. I mean, you've built this whole brand for yourself, right? All of this was this kind of crazy vulnerable space to kind of get yourself out there and make it happen, right?
yeah, totally. Yeah, and I find yes, all the time is the answer. And I find that every time that I am wrestling in my head about like, do I actually just say where I am right now or not? It works out well and ends up helping everybody in the room, but it's a scary moment. And that's, there's more, I mean, there's more and more research about why that is helpful for people too, but we know that like as a leader, as a facilitator, as whatever, like you can only take people as far as you're willing to go yourself, and people have can sense it if you're not right, so they sniff that out immediately. They can sense when it's bullshit, and so they will hold way back until you kind of prove that you're not, in my opinion. At least
Yeah,
I know that's how I am when I'm sitting on the other side.
right.
Yeah.
So you built a lot of this, if not all of this curriculum methodology yourself, right? So I suspect it's an amalgam of things that you've learned over the years, like actually being
Yeah.
in the thick of it. But some of it maybe is a little bit more theoretical that you tested with groups.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. I tend to like read, like, I have, as you can see, lots of books, and I have stacks literally all around my desk right now of team, all kinds of things. And it's interesting. I tend to be like, oh, I'm like researchers who I really respect, like I pick up their book about team and I'm like, oh, I'm going to read this book. And I know that I'm going to have to scrap my whole book that I just wrote because, right? Because it's going to disprove. And like, oh, actually, not at all. Like it's complementary. Like they do a different thing than I do. Like they're researchers. I'm a practitioner. Like I'm in there with people and like, oh, I see patterns and I see things that aren't working and oh, let's try this. And I have a bias for like, let's do something. So try a lot of things. And that's what this is a collection of, right? It's like a collection of things that work over and over and over and over. So to me, is it tested in a lab? No, but it's tested with real people. So that's, to me, that's what's most reliable.
That's great. Do you ever do any research to augment what you're doing in practice, or is it almost always just street smarts and kind of getting out there and learning it the hard way?
It's a huge combination. So I'm a huge researcher of other people's research, right? I don't have a team to go conduct and gather the metrics the way that actual researchers do, but I pour over all of their stuff. And I think one of the coolest things about when you're out doing what you do is to get validation from people with science behind it to go, oh wow, I was on the right track. Like, wow, there's actually research that backs up why I'm seeing that this works, right? So it's complementary. And so now I've gotten more intentional about like citing the research and like building off of that. And I think I do that, right? Like I'll read something, I'm like, okay, so if that's true, then let me now try this, right? And wow, look, that works. So it's a combination of those things. I'm a big synthesizer, right? I'm constantly gathering and like, okay, let's take that thing that I've been doing with people for a while and now add this piece in. What else is going to happen? So yeah.
Where have you experienced resistance, or like where that your approach or theory runs against the grain of what everybody else is, what all the researchers are saying? And have you had some sort of approach that looks in like it's the opposite direction and maybe has people scratching their heads or worse?
Interesting. It's an interesting question. I mean, one of the things I'm so excited about with research right now, which is not really answering your question, but I happen to love Brene Brown. She's an amazing researcher, and others like her, Amy Edmondson. There's so much research now coming out that's debunking so much of what has been taught before. And so I love that because I've been trying to debunk it myself. And there's a lot of things like, for example, leaders who are like, kind of, it's, whatever the situation is in the company, it's on a need to know basis. Like we'll give people as little information as possible. And so like, that's such a terrible idea. Don't do that because people fill in the story themselves with the worst case scenario that's definitely going to be worse than the truth. So don't do that. Be straight with people, right? Like, so like now there's research to support all the things that happen in psychological safety when you do that. And does that make sense? So that's one. Another is just over communicating. People tend to teach and be taught to be very conservative in what topics they broach with one another. And while you do have to be sensitive where other people are, the more there is an elephant in the room and the more we are not talking about it, the more it is holding back every other thing that we are productively trying to do together. Right. So that's one that I constantly coach against. And people are like, well, what do you mean? We can't possibly talk about that. Well, yeah, until you do, like you're going to get half of what you want out of this group. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So take that for example, because I think that's really fascinating. You've got an elephant in the room and you need to create a place where people, regardless of their hierarchy in the organization, maybe there's a sort of breadth across the organization that you're willing to have these kinds of sessions with, I would suspect, and you can maybe talk to that a little bit more. But there's got to be you're placing a bet on the table. Like if I'm going to go in that place and I'm really going to ask people to get vulnerable and I'm going to ask them to put that elephant out on the table, you must be prepared to sacrifice something for it, right? Like somebody might not be able to stick around after that meeting in the company, right? Or maybe the project that everybody thought was the most important thing isn't going to be important anymore, and you're not going to have that revenue stream because everybody finally truthfully said this is terrible, it's a terrible idea, right? How do you prepare for the fallout of something that potentially that profound?
Well, I guess the answer is actually answering that question you asked before too, which is the other thing that I push against that people don't like, which is if we're going to do something to open up something like that in a person's team or company, then the leader has to be in the process, has to, right? So often like a top leader will say, oh, we want you to come in and do this thing for the team. And oh, I'm going to go do this other thing. Like, no, you have to be there. Otherwise it doesn't work because to your point, if we open something up and it's not safe because the leader is the one, right, who doesn't want that to happen, then it's a dangerous thing for people to do, right? Yep. So this, which is why chapter 1 is safety first, right? Which is psychological safety is everything, right? So if people feel like there's going to be repercussion or or damage that they're going to do to their own career or opportunities or the way they're seen or reputation or any of those things, it doesn't matter. You could offer them $1 million bonus and they will not speak up. They won't.
Interesting.
So it has to be the leader who starts that, right?
Yeah.
And we have to get the leader to buy into that. Yeah.
I could definitely see that, I really want to get to the bottom of this. I want to get that elephant out in the room, but I've got this thing.
Yeah.
So let me know how that goes.
Yeah.
Just send me some notes after the session.
Exactly. Right.
That's interesting. I mean, like it's, from an agency standpoint, we always, excuse me, we always talk about being bold and, why don't we get good ideas in front of the client, and why can't we ever sell ideas to the client? And, that stuff it's really hard, especially if you're putting your relationship with the client on the line, if it feels like that at least, right? Or you're putting the agency's relationship with the client and the brand on the line. What are some of the guiding principles for people to be able to engage in that kind of tough talk? And again, I don't want to. I mean, everybody buy the book, but I'm just really interested because I think that's at the crux of what we're doing here, right? Is terrible ideas is just one sort of instrument, right, that allows people to be in that psychologically safe space and have conversations that maybe could otherwise be challenging because of the context of that conversation. What are some ways that you can strengthen people to be in that moment and deliver?
Yeah. One really, really important piece is people have to know what they can count on, right? So there have to be some kind of agreements out of the gate or it doesn't work. And when we look at high performing teams, whether it's Navy SEALs or improv groups or everything in between, right? Which actually those two seemingly opposite have a lot in common, right? Because it's all about having to trust the other person completely and build from what they're doing and be able to be dead honest about what didn't work afterwards, right? Otherwise, there's no way to grow. And so there's so much loaded into that right there, right? But when we look at that, people have to know that I can count on this, and this is absolutely not going to happen because everybody's agreed that that's not going to happen. Like, for example, there will be no retaliation for anything that I say here, right? For example, right? Or there won't be, we're going to have the next 10 minutes of just ideation and nobody's allowed to criticize anything else, right? Or whatever it might be, right? So there have to be certain things where people can take the governor off and go, okay, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Let's go. Right. And so I always tell teams and leaders to create those agreements together. Right. If I come in as a leader and go, here are the agreements, that doesn't work. Right. It has to come from the team to go, okay, what are all the things I'm actually afraid of?
Yep.
Right. That would cause me to hold back. And those need to be the agreements. Right. That we're not going to, whatever it might be. Yep. Huge. Once people can do that, then the little voice of fear in their head can shut up and they can just engage.
Yeah. That's awesome and scary, I'm sure. I just want to make sure we're saying hey to the folks in the stream. Support Sidecar, I actually thought about you immediately and was going to say something about Support Sidecar said, finally someone admits improv groups equals Navy SEALs.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's coming from the improv group guy who's at least playing Call of Duty every night. So I think he's seeing it from both sides. So it's and not I don't want to beat this down, and stop me. We can kind of shift gears at any point. But so let's say you do that. Everybody makes the agreement. You get into the room and you have those conversations. And obviously some stuff's going to come out if it's done right and people feel liberated to have the conversation. Some tough stuff might come out, right? And is there like follow-on counseling that happens after that to ensure that things don't become passive aggressive and awful, right? Because if I said that thing about Larry and I'd just been holding it in for all this time, Larry might have agreed and signed on the contract and everything, but then he leaves and he's like, I can't believe he said that about me, right?
Yeah.
Where do you go after that?
Okay, so a couple things. One, this is why when you come up with those agreements, you do it not in the heat of the moment. You do it separate. Completely, right? So in like what we think of as like a completely calm, sane moment that's not vulnerable. And I love to say to people, and this is a totally safe way to talk about it without talking about this team right now, right? Think of all the teams you've ever been on, right? And like, what are the things that get in the way? What are the things that hold you back? What are the things that give you pause? What are the things that went terribly? Let's get all those up on the board, right? It's not a bitch session necessarily, but we're gonna in 5 minutes list as many as we can. Okay, great. What are like 3, 4, 5 things that we could come up with that could knock all those out and prevent them from happening if we were going to come up with some agreements, right? And because we create them in a non dramatic moment, then when we're in the drama, it's not like, oh, you shouldn't have said that to me. Like, oh, you hurt my feelings. Like, it's not like me and you. It's, oh, there's this third thing called this set of agreements that we both agreed to, and that holds us accountable. Like, oh, okay, what you just said there, that, remember that thing about like no retaliation or whatever? Can you own that? Like, oh, my bad, you're right. Da, da, da. And once we can just calm down about that and just like all agree, then actually we move forward pretty quickly. It doesn't mean the conflicts don't happen. Right. But what happens is when, I mean, that's a good thing for conflicts to happen, right? Sure. Otherwise it's boring and homogenous. We never come up with anything creative. But there's a way to do it so that we can disagree without destroying each other, right? And actually hurting the creative process. So the other big thing is why, right? We have to agree on why we're doing this in the first place. And that's the other thing. Like when people, there's a whole thing in the book about trust. There's lots of different ways that trust happen. One of them is I got to know that our intention is aligned in why we're doing this right now, right? It doesn't have to be, I might be wanting to get other things out of it and you are too that are not in agreement, but we have to have at least one thing about what we're trying to do here that we agree on, right?
Yep.
Huge. Yeah.
Got it. That's awesome. Folks, be sure to sling some questions for Sarah into the session. So let's talk about terrible ideas for a second.
Yes.
Something that we love here. What are, do you have some good anecdotes of things that you tried that went wrong, or like things that you just weren't sure about, or that you were really trying to kind of stretch out and do something different and it didn't work?
Yeah. So one that was a huge learning for me, terrible idea. One of the very so this whole thing of being vulnerable, right? Of putting it out there. Like when I was first early on learning about it, my brother, who is 16 years older than me and does what I do on an even bigger stage. Literally, we were sharing a stage in Vegas at, I don't know, the Mirage, I think. Literally like 3,000 people in the audience, like jumbotrons, and we're sharing the stage. And I had been learning about some of this stuff, and I right out of the gate, as a way, I don't know what I was thinking, but share this like really vulnerable thing about him as a way to kind of open, I don't know what I was thinking, like as a try to kind of way to open up the emotional connection in the room. And it was the wrong thing to share. And so, it was a terrible moment. And it was a moment.
We've talked in here about, we've talked in here about the difference between terrible ideas and bad decisions.
Yes.
And trying, because I do think trying to get like our arms around what is a terrible idea and maybe what isn't it. And bad decisions, a terrible idea, I think, is coming from a place of truth. A terrible idea is coming from a foundation of good intentions to solve a problem, right? But taking maybe a different route. Bad decisions are probably not well thought out, not even thought out maybe at all. Would you say maybe you were in that zone at that moment, or did it have good intentions?
It had good intentions, but it was I don't know. It was maybe a combo. I don't know.
Did he like punch you in the arm really hard, like when you were kids or something afterwards, or what happened there?
Yeah. Emotionally, I got it for sure in that moment. 3,000 people,
Wow. Oh, thanks for sharing that. How are you with with the vulnerability end of things yourself? Like, do you is that sensitive space for you more so than the average person, or less so, or where are you in your vulnerability spectrum these days?
These days is a good question, because I think I think I spent a lot more time thinking about it and practicing it than most people, right? So I'm guessing that my tolerance for and comfort level is higher than other people. I do realize about myself periodically that I tend to push where other people just don't want to push. And I am pretty terrible actually at reading those cues and going, oh, I should back off now. I don't do that. I'm like, oh, you're really uncomfortable? Let's go. Right. So like that's what we need to talk about. So I learned the hard way that, like, why is it that person is avoiding me and avoiding me? Oh, yeah, maybe because, like, they just don't want to talk about that thing, right? Like, so, okay, got it. So there's that. I do think that right now, though, is a really important thing just to talk about for a minute. Like, I keep saying I'm going to write a blog about it, which I will, but like the analogy I keep giving is like everyone right now is like a water balloon that is filled too full, right? Like we are more vulnerable than we think we are. Like, or like, oh yeah, we've been in this many months, we've acclimated. Like it's the new normal, I'm fine. Until somebody literally like just pokes a little bit and like, so, and I'm coaching to it every single day, every single
Wow.
day. People don't realize how jacked up they are actually in a way, right? And how like the tiniest little things are making people either blow
Yeah.
or completely melt down, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's understandable, but to me it speaks to how bad we are at self-awareness and being able to where we are and actually just own that. So I'm
That's
not saying I'm
interesting.
a champion at it, but yeah, I'm noticing it a lot.
Well, when you you lose a lot of the cues for the observational cues in your life in this time, right? Because so many things are different at the same time that anything that you were used to be able to register yourself off of feels off kilter. And so I've experienced it too, where it's like I don't even the signs aren't even appearing of like whether I'm angry or upset or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. And so when that stuff starts stacking up and you don't even realize it, man, it is that water balloon analogy is very good because I think that's and you said that you're either going to explode or you're going to collapse. I think there's also probably the other terrible outcome, which is you just keep filling up with more water, right? Like
Yes.
that maybe the breaking point still is not is far off, and you don't realize just how
Yeah.
bloated and bulbous you're becoming.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Right.
vulnerability, I that was one of the things that was fueled me to do this stream because this is an incredibly vulnerable thing. I mean, like as you can see, like I'm still, God damn it, I'm still like forgetting to unmute things and stuff. So like my technical chops are on display all the time, but like just running a camera every morning and having to have something to say and to be out there. It's for me, it's been a good conditioning, because it's like I learn more and more about how little I have to lose when I do those things.
Yeah. Rep,
Um, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. I applaud you for doing that. Yeah. It's interesting. Like I started to do a few videos and I have not yet done a Facebook live or any of the live ones, right? I'll get up in front of a group live any day of the week,
yeah.
right? But the video thing, it's tough for me. Yeah.
Well, I think it's tough for a lot of people, and for me, my hangups were that I want those things to be perfect, and I want them to be
Yeah.
really unique and carefully thought out, and so that's why I stayed away from social media for the longest time, and I actually still it's not interesting to me because of the formulation of all that stuff as this sort of kind of abstract version of reality feels useless to me. But I do like this, like building a community like this and actually having real interesting people come through, be able to
Ah,
express themselves in a raw, right now kind of a way. Man, there's something really special about this.
that
Um,
was a really fun part of it.
but I think I'm not surprised that you would shy a little bit from creating video content because I know what that's like. You are a very confident, outgoing person, and I think the way that you're on when you have to be on with teams is evident. And I mean, we're seeing it right here. I think you've got a lot of really great energy. Talk to me about, because you do one-on-one coaching with people, and maybe this is where you're kind of getting with like you poke too hard in on somebody, right? Like what's the dynamic shift to go from that big group of people, maybe not even a big group, but a group of people with multiple personalities and interesting and probably challenging dynamics down to single conversations? Do you use the same tools? Do you have to like kind of throttle your energy? Like what's the shift look like when you're just doing one on one?
There's definitely a shift. I'm trying to think of it. It's definitely not a conscious shift, but it's completely different. It's funny because I think about it in reverse a little bit. I think people tend to get uh, get really weird when they're in front of a big group and unnatural and stiff and like reading stuff and the hack that I always give them when I'm coaching people about that is pretend it's just, I mean, it's the old cliche, but it's true. Like if you just talk to them like you're talking to a person, all that goes away, right? And it's fine. So to me, it's just about meeting people where they are, like whether it's one-on-one, whether it's big. I tend to, when I'm in a group, working group, and maybe this is because I taught high school for a long time, and teenagers in particular, not just in a high school setting, but also then went from that to teaching teachers who are the surliest, most critical, right? Most martyr, know-it-all, me included, right? Putting myself right in there with them, group of people with the biggest hearts and the greatest intentions in the world.
Yeah.
So my thing became about winning over the saltiest, most pessimistic, most cynical person in the room. And that's where I would focus. So that's a little bit the same, right? As like when I'm in with one person, it's like in my head, there's a stopwatch that begins. And it's like, okay, I've got this much time to figure out something they haven't been able to figure out yet and open it somehow, right?
Yeah.
Like same thing. It's a little bit like winning over the person in the back row. Like there's a little bit of, but in their very individual world. I don't know if that answers the question, but
No,
yeah.
that's helpful because there is a certain element of multiple personalities, multiple dimensions
Yeah,
of a human, right? When you're in that
right.
conversation, if you treat that as just a simple binary kind of a thing, I'm sure you're going to miss all of that
Oh, yeah,
detail.
for sure.
So a couple of things that came through. Matthias, who you may or may not know, Sarah is actually an agency creative in Brussels, but also an avid streamer on Twitch, was just saying he thinks this kind of content's what's missing in the marketing world. Content creators make so much awesome stuff because they dare to fail. Like these Twitch creators are out there just having conversations, trying stuff every single day, maybe multiple times during a stream. But marketers are too scared for this. Have you talked to I'm sure you have, right? You've talked to big brands and you've talked at the highest level of like how to recognize that the unpolished world is probably a really great place to be authentic, right? If you want to make meaningful connections with consumers.
Yeah,
Is
right.
that stuff that you've experienced with folks?
It is. It is. I think I tend to be the most successful with companies and leaders who are either a little bit there themselves consciously or willing to get to a place of like, it's about the people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I know how to do that, right? Like, if we're going to, because that is the unvarnished, just get in people's world, and I can help how to do that.
Yep.
Um, and that, I think that's where we see brands that have truly the most success, right? Like, and so to me, I get in rooms with people like that and companies like that, and I often will say, because I believe it, we're kind of in the same business, right? Which
Yeah.
is which is about making that connection and unlocking something for somebody that hasn't been unlocked before, and making meaning happen.
Yeah. That's interesting. You operate at a very intimate level, even with these teams, right? I mean, that's really. So, how often do you have to incorporate some of the higher flying enterprise level issues that people are dealing with, or is that something that is abstracted in your world, and you're really just trying to get down to sort of the individual's ways of managing that and dealing with it? It seems like they're inextricable, of course, but like, but it's probably way out of your sphere of influence and probably expertise to be talking about ERP problems that, are happening in an organization, right? That are fueling these tensions.
Yeah, totally. I don't get, it's interesting because I'm not being brought in for that, but what ends up happening, to your point, is it all gets all over everything anyway, right? And
Yep.
so, and I happen to be like, my brain just works strategically anyway, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
constantly scheming in my head, and there's constant flow chart of like if then stuff going on in my head all the time. So, and in order for me to be able to coach an individual about what the dynamics are, I have to understand the context. Otherwise, I'm trying to apply a cookie cutter thing to a very specific situation that may or may not work, right? So the
Sure.
more I understand what all those pieces, the more both I can help them to show up differently in it, but also can help see something that they can't see because they're too far in it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
because if you don't know that the elephant in the room is a Q3 failure of a supply chain strategy that went south because the logistics team didn't do it right. I mean, like if you don't understand the dynamics and the
totally. Yeah,
details, then what are you solving for in the
that's right.
end?
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back down to like kind of the people interaction. G Wismo asks, this is an interesting question. Do you feel meetings are more effective when no digital devices,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
unless you are presenting? And what is your current like vibe on how these virtual meetings need to go? Man, there's so much bad etiquette out there right now. It's dreadful actually, especially for somebody whose job is to be presenting a lot. What's your experience with that, and how are you counseling people in that respect?
Okay, so a few things. One is you mentioned cues before, like when we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about vulnerability, and it's something I keep talking about right now about this and how we're communicating now. We don't have the cues that we normally rely on, right? So we don't like, so we know that most of what people really understand about one another and how people really make meaning if we were in the same room together is less about the words that are spoken and more about everything else, right? It's what
Mm-hmm.
my face is doing, it's what my tonality is doing, it's what my body's doing, and you're reading all that. And oh, and by the way, what is coming out of my mouth, right?
Right.
And you trust all the rest of it way more than we trust the words, right? So that's how intuition works. And so to be stripped literally of all of those cues for almost a year, what, like it's nuts, right? So what we've had to do is adapt. So I've noticed it's an interesting thing. There's so many people who are spending all day long on Zoom. So I'm doing a coaching call with them, and I'm like, hey, do you want to actually do a phone call? And they're like, oh, that would be awesome. Like, wow, like a vacation, right? Like, so, wow, I can actually move around because if we were in the same room together, we would not be like this for an hour. We would not, right?
I
But
think we
this
found the
is
screenshot for the episode there, by the way.
lovely. Right. So we don't do that, but we are having to do that. So
Yep.
but it's weird because like right now, in order for us to have eye contact, I'm not looking at you at all. I'm looking at this little hole at the top of my computer, right?
Right.
Right
Yep.
now, I'm looking at you, but you, right? Like,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. So that's a bizarro thing too, is like the more intimate we need to be here, the more I need to not look at you, yet you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at me in my home. There are all these boundaries that are gone, right? So I think I keep saying, like, use your words. Like, we have to rely on words more than we ever have before
Interesting.
because we are so stripped of all the other cues, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so back to your technology question, I think first of all, for somebody to have this like blah, 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 while we're doing this,
Yeah.
complete terrible distraction, right?
Right.
Really interesting research about that too is like if we were in a meeting together, even for somebody to have their phone visible, even face down on the table,
Yep.
erodes the trust in the room with the other person, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating, right? Like just perception,
That is fascinating.
right? So, and it's because like what people just want and need, no matter what their rank, no matter what their experience, is just to be heard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds so cheesy, but it's really what we all just want. We just want to be validated, acknowledged, and for where we are and what we say, and then it matters for some reason, right?
You
So I
said
think
something really interesting about the sorry to interrupt, but like the cues and how I was just you got my brain rolling on the fact that we
that
need to use more words. And I think historically as a leader, you are sort of coached to be a good listener, right? And now this new dynamic is such that I need to actually speak so that you are getting that affirmation and validation that I'm hearing you, right? So that's a different dynamic, because where you
yes,
might have been able to confidently let somebody kind of unspool things, listen, let other people talk, and have
yeah,
some feedback before you as a leader are kind of inserting yourself, maybe have to operate a little bit differently now to ensure that people are feeling that feedback, right?
over index, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing how many really bright, creative, like strategic people I'm coaching right now who are, they're the people all over the board. They're the people who have families at home and their kids are on like e-learning all day, and that's a whole thing. And then you've got like the 20 somethings who like are in their apartment for 8 months at a time with no interaction with anybody, and are constantly like in their heads like, okay, I suck, right? Like, because I'm getting no actual live feedback from the world, right? So I
Yep.
think there's that too. Like in a normal, let's say agency space, you can be working on a thing and somebody else is working on a thing, and like you look up, glance over, and you get a lot of information without ever saying a word that validates I'm on the right track. We're on the right track. We're
Mm-hmm.
cool. I'm going to keep going. So we take that away. Now what? Now I have to make up all of that. And that the only thing I have to go on is the little bit of data I have, but mostly my own story and neuroses, right? Which usually
Yep.
usually
But
not
if you,
great, right?
it's not great, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
you, the tapes you play in your brain while that stuff's
right.
going on, and
That's
you
it.
can get
Yeah.
yourself into a bad place fast, right?
Really fast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So over index on that. And also about Zoom, like, and things to try. I just was posting about this yesterday. Like, we are so terrible, to your point, at being able to use words in a way that do all of it, because we've never had to, right? So in addition to that, we're also pretty terrible at, and this goes back to the vulnerability thing, of being able to name where we are, right? So that people can know. It's crazy how much time I observe teams spend trying to figure each other out, right?
Yep.
Rather than us focusing on what we're trying to do, right?
Yep.
So, and it's a waste of energy, right? So if we can get rid of some of that energy, know where people are, and then get creative, way more efficient, right? So just
Much
little
more.
things like at the beginning of a Zoom call, I'm calling it like 2 in, 2 out. Like on your way in, everybody goes around, pick 2 words to capture where you are coming into this meeting. Go, bam.
Interesting.
So, and it's interesting because it forces people to like, I don't know, where am I? Like, what word would I give to that? Yeah. And then they
Yeah.
say, right? And that, but that's a really good, it's a good muscle to build for them, like builds that self-awareness, and also really good for the rest of the team to go, oh, okay, good to know. Right.
Yep.
And, but we're not getting into a big discussion about it. And it's, I can choose how deep I want to go with my word or 2 words, right? Then to do it again on the way out of the meeting. Okay, 1 word, everybody go. Right? Again, another read, like it forces me to pinpoint, verbalize, make concrete, where am I? And feedback in 1 word for everybody else. So it teaches like people start to learn how to gauge one another with words,
Yep.
and also get more accurate about the words we're using.
That's awesome. And G Wismo loves that. I
Good.
think having
Yeah.
those little easy
So easy.
mnemonics that but one of the ones that I mentioned to you, and I don't know if it's still part of your curriculum or not, but the seeing a 10 over somebody's head,
That's
right? Which
right.
is just a
Huge.
simple way of like
It's in the new book.
reframing who somebody is. And maybe it's partly like triggered by like, where are you right now? Oh, I would have never guessed that you are uncertain about the progress that we're making, or right. And then all of a sudden it's context that you might not have had before to evaluate somebody in a moment in time and engage them in a different way, probably, right?
Right. Exactly. It makes people more sensitive to one another. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, this is a great conversation, and I knew we'd get into some real deal stuff. What any other thoughts on your mind as you were, preparing for coming into the Imagivate network? Any other words of wisdom that you wanted to share, or things that you're excited about, maybe exploring through
Yeah.
terrible ideation?
um I will say, I think energy right now is the thing that we all have to just watch. We got to watch our own energy, and that
Yep.
self awareness thing is no joke, right? There's a
Yep.
lot going on right now for people that, frankly, is not pleasant to look at, think about, dig into any of those things. Yet, also, what we know is avoiding it isn't going to help anything. So, because
Right.
then what happens is that back to the water balloon. Like somebody says, "Oh, the sky is blue," and you're like, like what?
Right.
Like, so so there's a right. So I think that there's the more we can build those muscles, the better. But also energy, meaning like state is something. Is we were talking about state changes earlier. Like where am I mentally, emotionally, physically? All together at one time, like
Yep.
we want to, like I'm on mentally, that's my job, right? So we
Yep.
tend to ignore like where am I emotionally, what is going on physically, yet they're all connected all the time. And anything we do, creativity, performance, learning, productivity, even attention, is all state dependent, all of it, right? State meaning where, what, like I'm in a creative, positive state, right? So there's a mental component, an emotional component, a physical component. The one thing people overlook all the time is physical,
Mm.
right? So I'm having this conversation with you while I'm standing up because I know that what's happening in my body is absolutely like influencing what my brain can do, right? And
Mm.
so I think that's the other thing with Zoom, especially, and for how people are working. We had a lot of walking from one meeting to another in the course of a day, 6 times in a day, allows your brain to actually flush out what just
Right.
happened, right? In
Yep.
a way. So when you are sitting in the same seat literally for 7 hours and you're only getting up when you just can't take it anymore, that's just not good for anything you're doing in at all, right?
Right.
So that kind of stuff. Yeah.
No, that's great. And I think creative people particularly are really bad about that. I know I am personally. Having gone through, I've shared this with the stream. I gained 30 pounds in 60 days by purely by eating creamsicle novelty ice cream bars because
Wow.
that was like, oh, that feels good. That makes
Right.
all this pain go
Yeah.
away.
That's one form of physical is just eating more.
Yeah.
Uh, things. Yeah, that feels good.
Not
Yeah.
super wise. Also, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I shaved 80% of my
Nice.
eyebrow off yesterday. So, like, I think trying to tune my mental, emotional, and physical state together would probably keep me in a safer space all the way around. Because next time it's not going to be a missing eyebrow. You know, it's gonna be it's gonna be something far more important. And
Your
oh,
lip or
fingers crossed
something.
that doesn't happen. All right, Sarah. Thank you so much. What's your time horizon on True Team?
So True Team is it's manuscript happening right now. Like actually, if people want to be part of beta testing it, I would love some teams to do that. Reach out to me. So, but I'm thinking within the next 6 months for sure, you're going to
Okay.
see it out. Yeah, stay
Hey,
tuned.
what's your Twitter handle? Is that a
Oh,
good place for people to kind of reach out to you
yeah,
if they want
sure.
to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Twitter, Instagram, anywhere. Let's see. So S Singer-Nourie. Yes.
S Singer-Nourie. Okay. We'll put that into the chat stream here. Be sure to reach out to Sarah if you want to beta test the book or you want to just continue this conversation. Sarah, thank you so much. I'm really glad we finally got you on the show, and you're welcome
All
back
right.
anytime.
Love this.
Who knows? We can maybe do it again sometime soon.
Sure. I'd love it. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so
Thanks, Sarah.
much.
Have a great day.
You
Awesome.
too.
That's it for Imagivate Live today, guys. Thanks again for coming out here. So glad to have you be a part of this, and the conversation, the thinking, all of this is what makes this show so great. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you later tonight with Thursday Night Thinkubator.